play. It's Tuesday today, in February, first week of February. I want to talk about my mum and dad's family. I don't know what I'm going to call it. Maybe I've wrote a few notes down. The rise and fall of the Nicholson family from 1986-87. When I say the Nicholson family, I mean Albert, Mamie, Alison, Richard, Debbie and Joanne. That family. So it might take a few attempts. I mean, ain't easy talking about your family, is it? But ain't not bad, it's just fact, this, the rise. So I'm going to take you back to 1986, Alison, Debbie and Joanne. My mum and dad aren't here anymore, so obviously they can't remember it. Other family members, well, 1986, Alison was working at, was it Allied Collide or something, near Seabrooks. I was doing a mechanics YTS course at Broomfield Garage. Debbie and Joanne was still at school, at Hanson School. Yeah. It was all good. My dad was doing really well at the post office, as he were then in charge of the northeastern area of the post office, electrical engineer part. My mum had done her part, bringing up 4 children, doing a woman chores, and my dad was out grafting, for post office. As an electrical engineer, we were moving through the gears, going up in his trade. And about in 1986, I've got a bit, because my mum had done her job, she'd always wanted to own a cafe. So my dad got a bank loan, He got a bank loan. I think it was for about £8,000 to buy the one, by the laundrette and the Milner's Arms, which wasn't doing right well then, but my mum took it over. Hold on. Blah, blah, blah. Post office electrical engineer. So he bought that for my mum, and he pushed her to go to college to do maths so she could do books and that, which she did. And so that was about 1986. I got a job at Seabrooks. So Alison working at Allied Collide. I was working at Seabrooks. Alison got Debbie a job at Allied Collide, and I got Joanne a job at Seabrooks. So mum and dad were at home. Dad was doing well. Mum had got her own cafe, a dream, which dad had always promised her. And all 4 children were working and living at home. We had those arguments, didn't we? But everything was hunky-dory, wasn't it? In about 1987, maybe 1988. And then, what happened then were, my dad was a manic depressive, and had always been on lithium to stabilise his manic depression, not bipolar, manic depression, after some friend of his died in a car crash when he was 14. So he'd been on lithium right up until, my dad was 14, so that was in 1953. He'd been on lithium from 1953 till, and it stabilised his mood, so he wasn't high and he wasn't low. It just stabilised it. Then, in about 1986, Prozac came on the scene. And we all know about Prozac, but my dad were on lithium, and he went to the doctors. It was Dr. Anne Newmark, actually, at Farrow Medical Centre, and she said, do you want to try this new wonder drug called Prozac? And he went with his wife, my mum, and they both sat there, and my dad said, yeah, all right. And it was Prozac back in 1987. They didn't know much about it apart from it was a new wonder drug to make people that were manic depressives happy. So my dad agreed, and his wife, my mum, agreed as well. And they went home, blah, 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 blah. Within 3 days, my dad was off his head. Yeah, he was off his head, and I mean, me and my 3 sisters and my mum, we didn't have a clue what was going on. We just knew that something was wrong. Yeah, and my dad, he'd gone from being the gentle, intelligent man that were always suited and booted whenever he went out, apart from when he was at home, building the Nicholson home for me and my 3 sisters. There were no grandkids and all that, so it was no to do then. So we were all at home, and then Dad started taking Prozac. Within 3 days, my mum was like, he's off his head. And this is all what I've learned after, a few years later. And she told me, they went back down to Farrow Medical Centre, talked to Anne Newmark, and my mum said, he only started taking them 3 days ago, and he's a completely different man. He was getting up in the morning, and he liked his, conducting music, my dad. And he was getting up at silly times and pretending to be a conductor. Then he was going round Undercliff, pretending that the IRA had, there were 2 hand pulls in the Green Man then. And he said, I'll have it out of that one because the IRA have put something in that. And he was going in fish shop, yeah? And this is only 3 days after taking Prozac. He was going in fish shop on a push bike, riding in and out and starting arguing with people while he was driving. And my mum had seen it. Me and my sisters had no idea. And then what happened from there in maybe 88, 89, yeah, 2 of my sisters got pregnant. One turned to drugs, and I fucked off. I went to Butlins now because we were only young, me and my 3 sisters. We had no idea what was going on. All we know is that a year earlier, me and my 3 sisters were all working. Nobody had children, well, apart from my mum and dad, and we were all working, and it was great. And then within a few months, it all collapsed because of Prozac, yeah, which we know now. But so 2 of my sisters got pregnant because we didn't know what was going on. We were only young kids, you know. I was about 19, Alison was about 21. She'd been going on holiday with Mandy, you know, abroad. And she once brought me a Barcelona top back. Do you know what I mean? And Debbie and Joanne had left school, and everything was rosy in the Nicholson family. It was good when you look back. And then Dad would not put on Prozac. He didn't know about it. And then 3 months later, everything had flipped. My dad was off his head. My mum was trying to get him off Prozac, but my dad thought he was all right. Yeah. So it was him that had to decide to come off Prozac, but he wouldn't because he thought he was brilliant. Me and my sisters had no idea what was going on. And within a year, 2 of my sisters had had a baby, Kirsty, Laura and Kirsty, and my other sister had moved out onto Pollard Lane with a boyfriend, and I'd fucked off to Butlins, and we had no idea. The family collapsed, you know. My mum started drinking, yeah, heavily, because she couldn't understand it either. You know, our husband had gone from that to that, So she started drinking heavily. And I'd moved down to London then, working in bars and clubs and all that, because I couldn't handle it. I was only about 20. And Alison, she'd moved to Flowerhouse Drive. Debbie lived down Barker End Road in a flat. Alison was seeing Phil Padgett. Debbie was seeing Sean Miller, Kirsty's dad. Phil Padgett is Laura's dad. And Joanne was seeing a guy called Dougie. Yeah. So, moving on, so I was coming back up from London and the whole family had collapsed. I mean, I didn't know what was going on. Alison didn't, Debbie didn't, Joanne didn't. My mum didn't really. She was just drinking, oh, my Albert. What's happened? And we were all young kids, you know. I mean, I call 18, 19, 20, 21, I call them young kids now because I'm older. A 14-year-old will look at a 21-year-old now and think, oh, they're old. But then, and it's hard talking about this, and I hope my three sisters see it, and their children and my children, I hope they see it, because it gives a bit of a background to the rise. 17, 18, mum and dad doing well in the jobs, we're all working, dad took Prozac, collapsed. The fall. So the family disintegrated. There, and there. And because none of us had a clue, and it were only years later, we're going into the 90s now, when Dad had come off Prozac and he'd realised he'd lost everything. He'd done all these things and he knew what he'd done while he was on Prozac. He tried to run over his wife and a couple of others, family, in his car on Filmia Gardens. That was Prozac, not my dad. And when he come off Prozac, he come round and he were on Henford Drive, living next door, what was she called? Grace Kelly, or Kelly Grace, and her sister, yeah? And he was ruined. He'd realised he'd lost everything, his family, his job, everything. And he said to me then, and I was only about 22, I come home from London, and I was sat with him one night, down there, and he was drinking white cider. He said, fucking son, I've had enough. I've lost everything. And he gave me this A4 sheet of what he'd found out since he'd come off Prozac, the really bad side effects. I mean, I'm not just talking like that, but I mean the 10% or 1% that send people absolutely deranged. And he said, son, while he was drinking, I said, Dad, you've got to stop drinking. He went, nah, at Henford Drive. And I swear, he gave me this A4 list that he'd wrote, said, look, son, this is why I am here and I've lost my family. So that night I went home. My mum was still at Filmia Gardens, and I sat down in my dad's chair, which my mum had took over in the corner, with a lamp on, and I read it, what I'd put down. I thought, fucking hell, yeah. Every one of them was what happened to our father. Yeah. So, it was awful. So, the family had disintegrated, the four of us all. And what happened over the next few years was my mum stopped drinking and she realised that she'd had grandkids then and she needed to stop drinking. And she did. She still went out and had, being a Scottish woman, but she wasn't drinking Bacardi and all that. And I found Dad when I came back once, just off Pollard Lane. It was fucked. Absolutely fucked. Ruined. And he was laid on a bed. And I put him over my shoulder, got in a taxi, took him back to Filmia Gardens. And I said, Mum, run the bath. And I put him in bath. And we found him somewhere like Spring Mount, yeah? But it was too late then for me dad. He'd lost everything. But then, so that was the rise earlier of my mum and dad's family. Then the fall after my dad took Prozac. Now the rise again was years later. Now let me have a look. I've wrote a few things down, yeah, that brought the family back together. And me and my three sisters rebuilt the Nicholsons after what happened to my dad. I mean, we had my mum's 65th. When did we have that? Oh, Peel Pub, yeah. Brilliant do. I was married then to Shelley. Yeah, an absolute brilliant do. And my sisters will remember it, where my mum did that dance with that Zimmer frame. And there were a fucking lot of people there. It was a brilliant night, wasn't it? No trouble. Then my mum's 70th, we had it at Prince of Wales. And what a do that was, with bagpipe and all that. And no trouble there. And then, I mean, you could go back further. My mum's mum, Margaret Hare, her 80th in Clackheaton. Brilliant. And she died a few years later, did Margaret Hare. And, we're in Clackheaton. Me and my ex-wife, Shelley, were living on Ollerton Road. And my dad, Jack, well, I didn't have Jack, she did. But my grand's 80th, the whole family were there. And I have always stayed sober at family do's, because when you get a mix of English, Irish and Scottish, there might be trouble, there might a family feud and brawl at bar, and then 5 minutes later be buying each other a drink. So I always stayed sober, going right back to, I don't know, my mum's 65th birthday. Always was sober, just in case, so I could say, no, blah, blah, blah. And my grand's 80th, Margaret Hare, and her 83rd, and Uncle Thomas's 65th. Yeah, that were in Clackheaton. Yeah. And there were never any problems. No one fell out. We, as a family, we were united again. I remember my mum's 75th at the Malt Kiln, yeah? And I hadn't seen my Jack for a few years, for reasons. But at 75th, we had it at Malt Kiln, and all family were there. It was great. It was a brilliant do. And even Tara were there then, at my mum's 75th, and she loved it. And my Uncle Andrew, we were all sat in corner, that snug bit, and Uncle Andrew said, you know, Richard, I am so jealous of your family. You're all like that. You're all glued together. You are so together. I wish my family were like that. And me and my sisters and Tara and whoever else were there, all family, we always had a great do. So where did it all go wrong? Well, this is where it starts going wrong. When you let an Islamist into your family and you welcome him with open arms, yeah? After